A ceasefire agreement, a fragile promise of peace in a land torn by decades of conflict and suffering, a symbol of hope amidst conflict. The dove, a universal emblem of peace, soaring over the ruins brings a glimmer of optimism. It represents a chance for peace, a moment to breathe, to rebuild. Families come together, communities start to heal, and the dream of a better tomorrow seems within reach. Yet, in the ongoing conflict between Israel and Gaza, the ceasefire stands as a cruel reminder of promises broken and lives lost. The shattered peace sign symbolizes the fragility of these agreements. Despite an agreement to halt hostilities, the region is once again engulfed in violence, leaving a trail of devastation and despair in its wake. Explosions rock the city, and the cries of children echo through the ruins. The recent Israeli attacks on Gaza, which have claimed the lives of at least 28 people, have sent shockwaves through the international community. The world watches in disbelief as the violence escalates. These attacks, a blatant violation of the agreed-upon ceasefire, underscore the fragility of peace in the region. The broken ceasefire agreement is a stark reminder of the challenges that lie ahead. The situation is dire, with innocent civilians caught in the crossfire of a conflict that seems to have no end in sight. Families huddled together, seeking safety amidst the chaos. The world watches in horror as the cycle of violence continues. News broadcasts show the devastation, and global citizens react with sorrow and frustration. Homes are reduced to rubble, families torn apart, and the hope for a brighter future dwindles with each passing day. The destruction is not just physical, but emotional, leaving deep scars. The situation demands attention, action, and a renewed commitment to finding a lasting solution. Protests for peace erupt worldwide and leaders are urged to take decisive steps. The question remains, how can a ceasefire be a ceasefire when the sound of bombs still echoes through the streets? The path to peace is fraught with challenges, but it is a journey that must be undertaken for the sake of future generations. To understand the current crisis, we need to rewind the clock, delving into the intricate web of events that have shaped the present scenario. We must trace the path that led us to this point, examining each twist and turn along the way. The roots of this conflict run deep, stretching back decades, but for our purposes we'll focus on the pivotal events of the past year. October 2023. Tensions escalate dramatically as Israel launches a series of attacks on Lebanon, igniting a new and intense chapter in the long-standing conflict. November 2024. After weeks of relentless violence, a glimmer of hope emerges as a ceasefire agreement is reached between Israel and Hezbollah, offering a brief respite. The agreement promises a cessation of hostilities and a chance for peace to take hold, raising hopes among the war-weary populations. 2024. Despite the ceasefire, violence continues to plague the region, with Israeli settlers displacing thousands of Palestinians in the West Bank, exacerbating tensions. January 2025. The fragile ceasefire lies in tatters as Israel launches airstrikes on Lebanon, claiming they are a response to previous attacks, shattering the brief peace. The strikes result in the tragic deaths of 28 people in Gaza and spark widespread international condemnation, highlighting the human cost of the conflict. Present day. As we stand at this critical juncture, the situation remains volatile, with no clear resolution in sight. The ceasefire, initially meant to bring an end to the violence, has instead become a cruel joke, a symbol of broken promises and shattered hopes. This broken promise has left countless lives hanging in the balance, with families torn apart and communities living in constant fear, yearning for a peace that seems ever elusive. Beyond the headlines and the political rhetoric, lies a heart-wrenching human toll. The conflict has exacted a heavy price on innocent civilians, leaving a trail of shattered lives in its wake. Families huddled in fear as bombs rain down from the sky, their homes transformed into tombs in an instant. Children, robbed of their innocence, bear witness to horrors no child should ever have to see. The numbers are staggering. Since October 2023, over 4,000 people have been killed in Lebanon, and countless others have been injured. The recent attacks on Gaza have claimed the lives of at least 28 people, a grim reminder that even in times of supposed ceasefire, the threat of violence looms large. The physical wounds may heal, but the psychological scars of this conflict will linger long after the bombs have stopped falling. In times of war, hospitals and medical facilities should be sanctuaries, places where the wounded can seek refuge and receive life-saving care. Yet, in the conflict between Israel and Gaza, these essential pillars of humanity have become targets themselves. Hospitals, already stretched thin by years of conflict and resource shortages, are now struggling to cope with the influx of casualties. Medical staff, working tirelessly under unimaginable conditions, are forced to make impossible choices as they try to save lives with limited supplies. The destruction of hospitals and medical infrastructure is not only a violation of international law, but a moral outrage. It is an act of cruelty that deprives the innocent of access to essential healthcare, condemning them to suffer and die needlessly. Section 5. A World Watching. The International Response. The international community has watched the unfolding events in Gaza with a mixture of condemnation and concern. World leaders have issued statements expressing their deep concern over the violence and calling for all parties to exercise restraint. The United Nations has condemned the attacks and called for an immediate ceasefire. The organization has also expressed grave concern over the humanitarian situation in Gaza, warning that the enclave is on the brink of a humanitarian catastrophe. However, despite the widespread condemnation, concrete action has been slow to materialize. The international community's response has been criticized by some as being too little, too late. Fueling the fire international support for Israel. While many nations have condemned the violence, some, most notably the United States, have continued to provide unwavering support to Israel. This support, both military and financial, has drawn criticism from those who argue that it emboldens Israel and perpetuates the cycle of violence. The U.S. has long been a staunch ally of Israel, providing billions of dollars in military aid each year. This aid, critics argue, gives Israel a sense of impunity, allowing it to act with aggression without fear of repercussions. The international community's response to the crisis in Gaza has been marked by a stark double standard. While Israel's actions have been met with muted criticism, the actions of other actors in the region have been met with swift and decisive action. The weight of silence, a call for action. Silence in the face of injustice is complicity. We cannot stand idly by as innocent lives are lost, as homes are destroyed, and as hope dwindles. The time for empty rhetoric and symbolic gestures has long passed. We need action, and we need it now. We must demand that our leaders take concrete steps to hold all parties to account for their actions. We must pressure our governments to implement sanctions, to impose arms embargoes, and to use all diplomatic means at their disposal to bring an end to the violence. But our responsibility goes beyond simply pressuring our leaders. We must also amplify the voices of those who are suffering, to raise awareness about the plight of the Palestinian people, and to challenge the narratives that perpetuate this conflict. Hope amidst the rubble. Finding solutions. The situation in Gaza may seem bleak, but we cannot afford to give in to despair. Amidst the rubble and chaos, there are countless stories of resilience and courage. People are coming together, helping each other, and finding ways to rebuild their lives. As long as there are people who are suffering, as long as there is even a glimmer of hope for peace, we must continue to strive for a better future. This hope is what drives us to keep pushing forward, to keep seeking solutions, no matter how difficult the path may seem. Finding a lasting solution to this complex conflict will require a multifaceted approach, one that addresses the root causes of the violence and works to build bridges of understanding between the parties involved. It means recognizing the humanity in each other and working together towards common goals. Dialogue, however difficult, is essential. It is through open and honest conversations that we can begin to understand each other's pain and aspirations. These dialogues are the first steps towards healing and reconciliation. We must create spaces where Israelis and Palestinians can come together to share their stories, to listen to one another's perspectives, and to begin the long and arduous process of reconciliation. These shared experiences can foster empathy and pave the way for mutual respect. We must also invest in initiatives that promote peace-building, education, and economic development. These initiatives can provide the tools and opportunities needed to build a more stable and prosperous future. By creating opportunities for people to build better lives for themselves and their families, we can help to break down the walls of mistrust and create a more hopeful future for all. It is through these collective efforts that we can turn the tide and move towards lasting peace. Standing together, a plea for peace. The conflict in Gaza is not just a conflict between Israelis and Palestinians, it is a conflict that affects us all. It is a conflict that challenges our humanity, our values, and our commitment to a more just and peaceful world. We cannot afford to turn a blind eye to the suffering, to the injustice, to the broken promises. We must stand in solidarity with all those who yearn for peace, who dream of a day when their children can live in safety and security. Let our voices rise above the din of bombs and the rhetoric of hate. Let us be the generation that breaks the cycle of violence and builds a future where peace, justice, and dignity prevail.